everyone's going to fall. Everyone's going to fail. It's not about preventing the fall. It's about learning how to bounce back. And the yoga practice teaches us how to bounce back and become more flexible and more resilient and more buoyant, and to kind of build this like almost bubble around us where like not a bubble, almost like a bouncy ball, right? So like when we do fall down, we just kind of bounce back, and we bounce back faster every time. And so I think it's been just learning how to not be so afraid of any of those failures. Like you might think of like a disengagement as a failure, or you might think of like even going through my divorce as a big failure, but instead it's a stepping stone on our path to keep evolving. And so every time we can look at these things as opportunities for growth as opposed to failure, I think it's super important.
Thank you for tuning in to the Mile 40 podcast. I am Bishoy Tadros, the author of Break Barriers and Audacious, both of which are sold on Amazon. And I invite you to join me as I engage with guests to discuss those bounce back moments that we encounter on our personal journey. Mile 40 is a forum to learn about how athletes, professionals, and leaders of all backgrounds stare down moments in life where the only option is to rise up. The Mile 40 podcast strives to remind listeners that the comeback is always greater than the setback. Welcome back to another episode of the Mile 40 podcast. Thank you all for continuing to tune in. I am so excited for today's episode. Hopefully I don't mess up the opening spiel that I usually give. If you haven't already, please be sure to hit subscribe if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Check out the show notes, pick up a copy of Break Barriers or Audacious, follow the show. I really, really appreciate it. Today's guest is Kristin McGee. She's a nationally recognized yoga and Pilates teacher, speaker, mompreneur, and author. With over 3 decades of experience in the fitness and wellness space, she has had a continuous roster of high-profile celebrities, pioneered the launch of Peloton's yoga and Pilates program, recently branched out on her own to launch Kristin McGee Movement, and most recently, she announced that she is now with Tonal. Kristin, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. I'm so happy we finally made this happen.
Of course. I am so excited as well. I really appreciate it. I don't even remember how long ago that we did the initial reach out, and it's been a while, but I've been following you, and I truly believe that things happen for a reason, because just following your journey these last couple of months, I just get so excited knowing that you were coming on the show, and we have a lot to talk about. Let's kick things off by just kind of giving the audience a little bit more of a further background around who you are, before you became the face that you are today, and everybody knows you for everything you've been doing on these platforms. But let's go back to Kristin's roots. Where did life kick off for you?
Oh, that's such a fun question. I grew up in a small town in southeastern Idaho, Pocatello, Idaho. And I have an older brother and a younger brother. I was right in the middle, the only girl. We grew up in a family that was very musical. My parents loved performing. They met in a musical at Idaho State University. My dad created a performing group that we were all in with a bunch of other kids as well. And it really got me the performance bug inside of me. And so that's how I ended up going to New York University as a theater major. At NYU is where I discovered yoga. And then I certified to teach yoga when I graduated to support my acting career. And it just became this amazing snowball effect where I kept getting more work teaching yoga. Then I certified to teach Pilates, got my strength training certificate, immersed myself in the fitness world in New York City. And all of these incredible opportunities have come my way just because I keep following this passion for movement and helping people feel good in their bodies.
Wow. I mean, like, you have to know, coming to New York from Idaho, a lot of differences there. All right. And I'm a little bit interested to know how you set yourself up for that kind of move, and perhaps what some of the biggest surprises were that came your way. But I'm also interested in hearing a little bit more about, did your brothers go down, a similar route, pursuing creative passions? And with regards to maybe some of the values that your family instilled in you to kind of keep you moving forward in a path that, not a lot of people go down, because, as you know, there's a lot of obstacles to succeed on a journey such as yours. So tell me a little bit about, let's go back to the family a little bit. Tell me a little bit more about some of the values that they instilled in you.
Okay. And that is very true. And I think that My mother is such a huge cheerleader, and she's always been the type of person who believes in everyone and believes in everyone's potential and never let us think small. She would always say, follow your dreams, follow your passions, think big. The world is your oyster. I loved that she has just this really great energy and believes in everyone. So we were the type of household that had friends over all the time. Anyone who felt like they were either displaced or this or that, like they would always come to the McGee's house, I felt like. And my older brother was in a band, and half of his band members were at our house all of the time. He ended up going to California to pursue his music and his band for a while, and then ended up pivoting and going into finance and business. And my younger brother followed in my father's footsteps as a doctor. So it's a funny story. When my parents met, my dad was also pursuing music and wanted to be a musician, huge Beatles fan, huge, like he just loves to play the piano and sing. And my mom was a big supporter of his as well, but then he got a little doubtful, like, oh, I need to fall back, and ended up going to medical school. I think with me, I always just kind of leap before I look, to be honest. Like I get so excited. And even with the New York move, I just went for it, not realizing that, oh, this is a whole different, change of pace and scenery than living in small town Pocatello, Idaho. But I loved it. The energy was just magnetic. I think I felt so invigorated and so alive, and loved the fact that so many people were in New York City for a similar reason. They wanted to pursue their passion, make their dreams come true. I loved the culture, the diversity. I loved being able to walk everywhere. I loved the subway. I still love public transportation. I think it's amazing. I hate having to be stuck in a car. And it it never really felt, it's interesting, but looking back, it never really felt um, not doable. I don't know how to explain it, but it just felt like, okay, I'm here and let's just figure it out.
Well, that think big mentality is incredibly important if you're going to, dive headfirst into a city like New York. And I want to ask you, when you think about Idaho, now, obviously, I'm sure over time your relationship with your roots has changed and evolved in different ways. And I'm sure the way
Mhm.
you thought of it at one point may be different than you think about it now. But when you think about, your roots, your foundation in Idaho, what do you think about the most? What do you associate it with?
I think of Idaho as being very nature. Like I just feel like there's so much about being in the mountains and having this incredible childhood where we have a pond in our backyard, and my brother and I were hunting for crawfish in the stream, and we would ride dirt bikes everywhere. And there's just a very beautiful pace in Idaho that's the exact opposite of the pace of New York City. But there's something so great about both of them, I think. There's really a wonderful feeling of connection to the earth and simple life, being able to really just appreciate seeing the sunrise in the morning and smelling the fresh air and going skiing on the weekends. And so I feel like I just love that it's like the best of both worlds, I think, when you can go home and ski and see family and be in Idaho and be in nature. My dad loves to camp and go on these hiking trips. And so he would take us every summer to Yellowstone National Park, or you'd get to explore so much. There's so much beauty in the state of Idaho that when people come and visit, I think they're like, wow, it's magnificent. The mountains are just breathtaking. Um, and I also do think there's something really nice about just that slower pace, that where people can be a little more present and relaxed. You can't order food at 1 a.m. or you can't, go out on the streets and there's something constantly going on. I feel like sometimes you have to make more of your own opportunities in smaller places like that. That's why my parents, when they moved back to Pocatello, there was not much going on in the arts. And that's when my mom and dad were like, well, let's create a creative outlet for the kids, because there wasn't really anything like that. So unlike New York, where you could step outside and there'd be 1,000 million things that you could do at any given point, right?
I love that. And, as you were talking, I was thinking, right? When you think about New York, obviously it's a melting pot. People come from all over the world. And over the years, you start to really realize what you probably should have known from the beginning is that everyone has their own perspective. Everybody's coming from a different background and everyone has had their own experiences. And in a certain way, those experiences in a city like New York, where you are dealing with a little bit of a rat race, regardless of what industry you're in, those differences sometimes become competitive advantages, right? Because people have seen things that other people have not. And that could be people coming from opposite sides of the world, from, different regions, and people even coming from different parts of the country. And when I think about, you speaking about the stillness and the ability to be present and the ability to perhaps appreciate nature, when you think about, again, a big city like New York, not necessarily everybody has been exposed to the beauty that you've been exposed to. So talk to me a little bit about how that, potentially became a little bit of an advantage for you as you navigated, different stepping stones in your career or different elements with regards to just assimilating in the big city.
That is very true. And I think when you were saying that, the two things that popped into my mind, one was that there is this kind of trust or faith that we had growing up. And, my parents never locked our house doors ever. We never locked our doors. Like it was like, there's just this kind of feeling. And I think I brought that with me to New York, where I never prejudged someone. I was never afraid to talk to someone. I still smile at people on the street. I'm always open minded to hearing people's, journey and path. And I love to hear where people come from and I love to hear people's stories. So maybe there's this like less of an edge from like, if you've grown up in a city, I think there's, there are certain precautions you have to take and you definitely are more aware and you definitely lock your doors at night, where I had this kind of Pollyanna almost openness that I might be not the same that a lot of people have in the city. So maybe that worked to my advantage, where I always give people the benefit of the doubt and I trust everyone. It's like, I don't really have this kind of like discerning edge or kind of, this gruffness, not gruffness, but I think New Yorkers are very like, just like to the point and they're on the go and they're getting to their destination. And so also growing up in that outdoor experience and being present with, I think I also am very just aware of everything around me and I really appreciate it. So when I am in Central Park, I'm taking it all in. And if I am rushing from one place to the next, I still do like to observe and be present and see what's going on. I love to be on the subway and make eye contact with someone and not just be stuck on my phone or in the moment more.
I love that. And I mean, a little bit of a confession. Living in the city, first of all, I have kids now, so I do lock my doors. But when
Yes.
I lived in the city, I didn't lock my doors. I
I
I
love
did not lock my doors, and I appreciated that perspective, like, from your parents, because I felt the same way. And, a lot of people, my wife thought I was absolutely crazy that I wouldn't lock my doors. And my mindset was always, "Look, if someone, the things that I have, I don't put too much value on the materialistic things that I have,
Yes.
even if they are expensive, whether it's an expensive watch, a TV, a laptop, whatever it may be." And I always thought to myself, if somebody really needs this that bad, where they're going to go through the front door and then break in through my door and then take it, like they must need this more than I do. And that was always my mentality around it. Again, my wife thought I was crazy, but it worked for me. Now I lock my doors for anybody listening. I have two young girls at home, so I make sure to lock my doors. But but I do feel like that ability to let go was really
Yes.
tremendously helpful beyond, just the idea of like, am I going to get robbed? It allowed me to worry less. It allowed me to carry less weight on my shoulders in interactions with people. It allowed me to let my guard down a little bit and kind of run with the presumption that, despite the fact that if you were to open up the newspaper, you'd see a lot of headlines that, might disturb you. There's still a lot of good to be found in the people that you interact with on a daily basis. And if you continue looking for it, you'll find it.
I
Yeah.
think that's what we notice the most about New York City is that there is so much good. There is so many amazing, enriching opportunities, and there's people of all walks of life who are all there together, working together and supporting each other. And you hear those tiny little bits of like news that are so disheartening and sad, but it's not, I don't think it's the norm. And that was what's always was so funny when my friends, oh my gosh, New York, oh my gosh, how do you live in New York? Oh, it's so, and it's like, actually, I don't know. It's always felt safe to me. I've never once in my entire life felt unsafe in the city, knock wood. But it's kind of, I've had the opposite experience where I find that people are very willing to help and are incredible.
Yeah. And you had mentioned earlier that, to a fault sometimes when you're chasing something down, you dive head first, right? Like going to New York, right? And when I think about the premise of the show and perhaps where the conversation is going is, were you prepared, or how did you prepare yourself if perhaps things didn't work out the way that you had expected? Like, what was your relationship with either mismanaged expectations or things not going your way, or really just kind of maybe something not being what you thought it might be?
I think I'm getting better at managing my expectations and learning how to become more resilient and bounce back after certain things happen. And I had an incredible yoga teacher that I met. It's funny because I was actually engaged very young, like late 20s, to this amazing person who lived in Westchester. And I moved in with him for the year. And it was right before 9/11 happened, or it was the year that 9/11 happened. And it was like this eye opening experience for the both of us. And we decided life is short. Let's, reconsider this. And so I moved back into the city. He stayed in Westchester. But I think, at the time it was like, oh my gosh, I was going to get married and now I'm not going to get married. And 9/11 happened. And it was so just such a really sad time in New York City. And also, to your point, also an incredible time in New York City because you saw how many people band together to support each other and be there for each other. But I think through this woman that I met in Katona yoga, Naveen, through my yoga practice with her, I continued to keep going up to her teacher's class every Wednesday and practice with her. And she's always talking about everyone's going to fall, everyone's going to fail. It's not about preventing the fall, it's about learning how to bounce back. And the yoga practice teaches us how to bounce back and become more flexible and more resilient and more buoyant, and to kind of build this almost bubble around us where we are not a bubble, almost like a bouncy ball, right? So when we do fall down, we just kind of bounce back and we bounce back faster every time. And so I think it's been just learning how to not be so afraid of any of those failures. Like you might think of a disengagement as a failure, or you might think of even going through my divorce as a big failure, but instead it's just a stepping stone on our path to keep evolving. And so every time we can look at these things as opportunities for growth as opposed to failure, I think it's super important.
Yeah, I've used the word failure before on the show, but for some reason, when I was asking the question, I didn't want to use the word failure today because I
Yeah.
feel like in following you and you know the content that you're putting out there, not just in the content, but even the energy that I get from you and in the conversations that we've had, you really put forth this emotion of constant growth, constant evolution, constant learning, and you've been transparent about some of the things that you've had to navigate. And that says a lot about not only you, but also how you carry yourself. And I think if I could ask for one thing by the end of this episode, it's for the audience to pick up on some of this. So that way maybe we can get a little bit of that energy ourselves, because I do feel like it's your secret sauce, especially
Well,
when you
thank
think,
you.
of course, especially when you think about, look, you work in a very competitive industry, and an industry that's very forward facing, behind the camera, and there are up and comers every single day. And one of the things that distinguishes you is also like your longevity in the industry, right? You've been doing this for a long time, admittedly yourself. Even in your bio, you say that. And so it takes someone who leads with grace for themselves as well as others, of course, in order to get to where you are today. And so I guess I just went on a rant. I didn't really have a question there, but I did mean everything that I said. Uh,
Thank you.
of course.
And Bex Gentry is the one who taught me the acronym for fail first attempt in learning. And I always loved that. I always come back to that because I love how she said that once on one of her runs when I was training for the marathon. I would train with all my colleagues at Peloton with she and Matt Wilpers. And you get these great little tidbits. And I loved how she put that into perspective. And I want to keep showing that to my boys as well. I think growing up, somewhat of a perfectionist, I was so afraid of the failing. I was so afraid to be seen other than perfect. And actually, to your point, like it's in that vulnerability. It's when we show ourselves as real humans and we say, look at, I've done this and that, we're all just learning together and evolving together. So I think it's really important for us to not be afraid to show up fully and to embrace all parts of ourselves. And I think maybe that's also been helpful in keeping my career going, is that I definitely feel like a lifelong student, and I want to constantly learn from everyone, whether they're older or younger than me, or, I just think that we all have something to offer. So when we get to a point in our career where we're like, oh, I know it all, or I have it all, that's when I think we start to do ourselves a disservice, because I feel like there's so much we can learn, and we can learn from the younger generation, and they're teaching me new ways to, run by platforms. And, if I had stuck in this place of like, oh, it's DVD era, I would never have gotten to Peloton. So I think that having this growth mindset is super important. And that's what I admire about you. I feel like that's your whole thing. You live for that.
If you know me, you know that I like to look good and feel good. As an endurance athlete who trains daily, I need my wardrobe to fit the mold. Roan creates performance-driven clothing for your active lifestyle. Each piece is designed for versatility and made with integrity to outfit you for an active life lived on your own terms. The Roan promise is to help you move forever forward. Use code MILE40 for 20% off online and in-store for new customers only. Visit www.roan.com, that's Roan spelled RHONE, or find your local store and move forever forward starting today. Let's do a little bit of a timeline here, just so that way we can kind of get the audience up to speed. So you talked about where you were right around 9/11, engagement didn't work out. So then you moved back to the city. Where in the city were you specifically? What area?
Oh, I have some really fun areas. So when I first went to NYU, I was in the 3rd Avenue North dorms. So I was on 11th and 3rd, and I had a job at Ben & Jerry's. I was scooping ice cream and managing the ice cream store. And there would be this line that would line up across the street every time the movie theater let out. Or what's the name of, there's a big nightclub right across the street. And it just lost my mind. I just lost the name, but Webster Hall.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
So Webster Hall was across the street. And so I was there, and then I moved in with a boyfriend my senior year. We lived on 10th between 1st and A. Then I lived in Washington Square. Then I lived in in Westchester for a year. Then I moved to Soho. And then from Soho, West Village, from West Village, Upper West Side. So let's think. So NYU, discovered yoga, certified to teach when I graduated. I was at Crunch teaching a lot of yoga classes. That's when they asked me to start teaching Pilates classes. So I got my Pilates certification with Kelly Kane. She's amazing. And then in 2003, I got cast to lead the first MTV yoga video.
Oh, wow.
And that put my name out there. That really started to open doors, because I did MTV yoga, MTV power yoga, MTV Pilates, and MTV Pilates mix. And I went to LA for this big LA Yoga Expo. That's where I met a man who was teaching privates to Steve Martin. And then I started seeing Steve Martin in New York, because he's bi-coastal. So he had his California yoga teacher, and then he had me. And then he introduced me to Sean Levy, who wrote and directed Date Night. He also is the producer of Stranger Things and an incredible person. And he asked me to start doing yoga with Tina Fey when he was producing Date Night. And so it was like all these little things that kept on, these amazing experiences that just kept on opening up for me. I think in around 2007, I started working on the Home Shopping Network, and it was for a Pilates Power Gym, which was a kind of a compact in-home reformer, which always makes me laugh, because I'm like, okay, the evolution and integration of in-home Pilates machines to have gone from the Pilates Power Gym to now Tonal offering Pilates. It's so cool. And I started writing for Health Magazine. And I did a DVD with Bethany Frankel, I think around 2009 or 2010. Maybe that's when I did my guest.
2009.
Real Housewives.
Was Real Housewives out in 2009?
She and I were working together a little bit privately, and she also did some contributions for Health Magazine. I'm pretty sure we did 2010 is when we did Body by Bethany. I can double check. And
so
then,
let me ask you really quick. Clearly,
yeah.
there's a snowball of momentum that's been going on during that period, right?
Yes.
And would you say the foundation of that momentum was your differentiated ability as an instructor? Would you say that it was, your people skills and maybe some of the things that we talked about earlier that differentiated you, that kind of, allowed you to kind of really, really embrace this wave of success? Because as we've kind of mentioned several times so far, this is a really, really competitive space. And there are probably a lot of people who wanted to be in your shoes at your time. And to this day, there are people who are aspiring to, have their own waves similar to that. But the chances are of success are probably not high. And so as it was happening, I based on what I know about you, I feel like you're not someone to really kind of, you know, give yourself too much credit and pat yourself on the back. You're probably present as it's happening. That's probably one of your differentiators. But how are you remaining grounded, through that period?
I think two things. One is I am definitely a hard worker. So I do find when people nowadays will say, "Oh, how'd you get so lucky?" And I was thinking, well, I think I just was always working. I was always showing up. I was never calling in sick. I mean, obviously if I got sick, I'd get sick, but I never really was getting sick. I wasn't I have the same kind of healthy regimen that I have now that I had then. I wasn't really going out partying much. I was um, just showing up, loving my classes, loving my students, trying to create good programming every time I went in to teach any class. Like I always wanted every class to be good. And I would wake up and teach 5 a.m. classes. I would stay late and teach 7:30 p.m. classes at Clay. Even when I was getting some of these jobs that seem like such big breakthroughs, I think that when you see any really talented working actor, you would think the same thing, because no matter what their big breakout role is, they're still going to have to audition for the next one. It's not like you just become this superstar and then that's it. Like you're still work. I saw Scarlett Johansson once speak, and she's like, "I'm still working. I'm still work for hire. I'm still, going out to audition." And so I think it's this not getting too complacent in your craft or in your skills. Like even now, I love that Tonal is pushing me to become different and stronger in other ways. So I think that's one. I just think always showing up is really important. And then two, I think there's that consistency. You're consistent in what you're teaching. You're consistent in how you're showing up. You want to be a team player. You want to do good work. You want to collaborate with really amazing people. So I think that's also another sign maybe, or something that I have going for me. Again, maybe it's just that openness of I'm not much of a no person. It's very hard for me to say no. So maybe it's that openness to opportunities and constantly saying yes to things. And also realizing, people don't know, like I launched a bunch of my own DVDs in 2005 and they pretty much failed. So to also realize that there was some major failures along the way. I had business partners that I worked with that were incredible. After the MTV series, we thought, oh, let's go launch our own DVDs. They're going to do amazing. My dad invested a bunch of money. We spent so much money on production, and we have a basement full of DVDs that really never sold. And I launched my own app in 2000. Gosh, I can't remember. I worked with, again, really great people, App Session. And that's how I met Savannah Guthrie, because she was taking classes on my app. But again, that app never really took off. So I think that also there are a lot of misses behind the scenes as well, but we just kind of keep seeing the hits out, public facing. So for anyone who doubts themselves when there's those moments of these kind of pitfalls, or you're like, oh, if you keep on showing up, you keep on putting yourself out there, the success will come.
When you think back to younger you, what were some of your motivations? I mean, like, I'm not walking away from this conversation believing that you were doing this for financial purposes. Like, I didn't think it sounds like there
No, I
were.
never.
I'm, I'm, I kind of want to get into your head a little bit because it's a unique trajectory of success. And again, when I think about the quick timeline and the things that happen right there, and from what I know about you, uh, it could be just the fact that you were addicted to the work, which is fair if that was the case. It could be that you had a passion for what you were doing and that you wanted to see it through. But I also want to know, like, what was the potential end goal at that time? Like, was when you had originally gone to NYU, I imagine this was not what you thought you were going to be doing when you graduated. So talk to me a little bit about what your
100%.
initial motivations were, and then maybe what they were as things were were developing, just so we can kind of get into your head a little bit.
Yeah, I think as a young girl, I always wanted to teach. I remember like having my stuffed animals lined up, and I thought I would be a school teacher. I'd have the blackboard out and I would be teaching them things. I also did love the performance. When I mentioned my parents starting Casey and the Sunshine Kids, and we performed, and I loved that immediate audience interaction where you could see people just feel good immediately, because we would have these incredible medleys and we'd go out into the audience and we'd shake people's hands, and we'd go to even like nursing homes and whatnot. And it was so cool to see just how much it could brighten someone's day. And then NYU was definitely that theater bug. Like I wanted to do theater, and more so theater than film and TV, because I loved that immediate experience. That's where I feel like yoga is very similar. That's an immediate, intimate, present moment that people can feel and experience. And for sure thought that's really what I wanted to do, was to be on stage and to perform. And I did some stuff for the McCarter Theater, and I did some off-Broadway stuff. It just never felt like I had the chops to be a full-on Broadway performer. They are insanely talented. Between the singing, the dancing, the acting, it is like I have so much admiration for them. And then yoga was just, I think, what's always kept me balanced and feeling the best in my body and mind. So I think sharing something that has worked so well for me has been kind of the through line with it all. And it doesn't really matter, I guess, how I'm sharing it, as long as I'm sharing it. So I've had these really lucky opportunities to share it in a more public, global way. But even if I was still just going to a local yoga studio and teaching, I would have as much fulfillment, I think, because I really do love teaching yoga, and I really do love what it's done for me. Movement in general, any sort of movement that has just made such an impact on my life. So I think maybe just constantly feeling like I love doing this. I love the way it makes me feel. And I could see myself doing this way into my hundreds. Like I loved how Portia, she recently passed, maybe it was a year ago or so, but she was this 100-something-year-old yoga teacher who just had so much grace and lightness. And you step in front of her, you're in her presence, and you just feel like, oh, this is such a warm hug.
I love that. I love that. And honestly, that's what you want to be hearing from your yoga instructor. So that's awesome. All right. So take me back now to 2010, 2011-ish. Where are we going from there? Last we left off, you mentioned Bethany Frankel.
Yes, and that fun spot on 30 Rock, because I went in and auditioned for Tina Fey, and I got to play Jason Sudeikis's fiance on 30
Amazing.
Rock, which was really, really fun.
Whoa. Wait.
And
So
wasn't
you were
that
on the
cool?
show?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Season 4. And so that was a full circle pinch me moment, because I've
Wow.
always wanted to be an actress. And then I discovered yoga, and then it came back around in this really cool way, because when I was auditioning for acting roles, I was really stressed and I put so much pressure on myself, and it probably showed through. And then when I was teaching yoga for so many years, and Tina was like, oh, the casting director is going to bring you in for a role you might be good for, I was like, oh, there's no way I'm going to get this part, and just have fun. And so the fact that I just went in and had fun, I finally got this acting role. And we did really fun. Floyd was the one episode you'll have to see. I think it's episode 406. And then we did 2 more after that. So I'm trying to think what came next. Well, 2013, I had my first son. And that was, that's transformative.
Well, when did you get married?
2 daughters. That was 2009.
And were you still in the city?
Still in the city for sure. Yep,
Got it.
always in the city. And so 2009, married. 2013, I had Timothy and was teaching yoga still like Equinox, privates. Wasn't really, maybe I was still doing a little bit of HSM then because I remember he would come with me to Florida. I would put him in the Bjorn and we'd fly down there together and I would work and he'd be with me in the hotel room. And then 2015, I did a campaign with Robin Arzon.
Okay.
We did a C9 campaign. And it was me and Robin and a Dallas, and I always forget his name. He was teaching these really cool, like free yoga classes in Central Park. I'll think of it. So the four of us did this big campaign together. And I started teaching yoga for Target. So Target would have a big event in Minnesota, and I went there and did some yoga there. Or I would do, I don't even know, we went to Wanderlust, but it was Wanderlust in the city that I led at. So I was still teaching at some of these big events. And in 2018 is when I messaged Robin and I said, is Peloton going to bring yoga to the platform? Like, I just kind of was like, let's bring some yoga to Peloton. They had Colleen Seidman teaching a few classes filmed in a different location.
So I want to ask 2015 in particular, right around that era, because this has come up several times on this show because we've had a lot of people from the fitness world in New York on this show. That 2015 to 2019 era was the rise of boutique fitness in Manhattan, and things were absolutely buzzing, right? And we've had the founder of Swerve on here. We've had people from Tone House on here. We've had people from basically Grit, boxing. Every boutique fitness studio has at some point touched this show. And I remember that era as being the glory days of, what it was like living in New York, at least for myself, because that's when things in the industry felt like they were really buzzing.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about maybe how that era impacted you, if it did at all, right? Because I had to imagine with all of the studios being built up during that time, there was a lot just kind of going on. Did it impact you at all?
Interesting. I feel like not really, because I had such a good private clientele base. And then I was at Equinox, and Equinox has always done well. I was at the Soho Equinox. I was at the Equinox up in Columbus Circle, or right there on 66th Street. 66, is it Columbus? I used to teach with Andy Spear.
Oh, yeah.
He and I were both at the same Soho Equinox. And I used to teach with Christine Derricole way back in the day at Clay, that private boutique gym on 14th Street. I don't know if you ever went to Clay. That's how I met Leanne Rhymes and started working with her. So I feel like there wasn't really, I had a pretty set career at that point and enough going on to support myself, but very interested. And I would get offers.
I had to imagine you were probably getting, because they're all being built in Flatiron, right?
Yes, exactly.
Every yoga studio. Yep, exactly.
Yep.
Interesting. Okay, so now 2018.
And then I had my twins in 2016, so maybe I got came a little out of the loop at that point, because once you have twins, you're like, can I even come up for air for a year? Well, it was really insane. And I still was just kind of teaching at the locations that I was comfortable, my privates again in the Equinox.
Wow. Side note, and something for us to talk about after this, and it's public information now for anyone listening, but my sister just found out she's having twins. So, awesome. I'll definitely have to be asking you a couple questions, maybe connecting you two.
Send her my way. We can totally talk about all things twins. That's so exciting.
Awesome. Yeah. So 2016 twins, 2018, you reach out to Robin and you ask her if Peloton is thinking about potentially adding on a yoga platform. How'd that conversation go?
At first she was like, no. I remember she direct messaged me back. She's like, no, I don't think so. But then I got a message from her a couple weeks later and was like, yeah, come on in. And I had never had a longer, audition, I would call it, or, in my entire life. I think I went through 6 weeks of coming in, coming back, auditioning again, meetings. I kept thinking, oh, there's no way I'm going to get hired here, because I went in here for a couple of weeks. And then finally I got this job offer and I was like, wow, this is crazy. And it was so interesting how much, I think even since I graduated college, I've always kind of been my own independent contractor.
Yeah.
I'd never had a job really with health benefits, with a
Sure.
401k plan, with any of that.
Yeah.
I was always just kind of
Yeah.
doing my own work for hire stuff. And so then when I got this first Peloton contract, I was like, wow, this is mind blowing. It's so different to be in a position in a kind of a corporate world where now I'm definitely on payroll and I'm an employee. So it was a whole new way of working, which there's pros and cons to both, right? But it was really awesome to get my feet wet and to feel what it was like to be in a corporation and working with these incredible talented people that again made you raise the bar on everything I was doing, and showing up in meetings and writing professional emails, all of that kind of stuff that I was like, I never really had to do a lot of this in my entire career, which is wild, right? Like the little things that you don't think about, which for someone in the corporate world would be like the exact opposite. They're like, been doing this all my life, and I kind of had this new eye-opening experience and learning of ways to work differently. I loved it.
That's interesting. And I'm actually curious, and I'm sure the audience might be curious, what is the difference between being a Peloton instructor, for instance, and an instructor at a studio, right? Because again, from an audience perspective, maybe the presumption is if you're a Peloton instructor, you just, you go to the class, if it's a live class, you lead the class, and then maybe you go home and that's it. Like, we don't really know what your day to day is like. And I know, obviously you were not doing the bike, but talk to me a little bit about what the day to day is like for a Peloton instructor.
Oh, okay. I would say I worked my butt off during, right before Peloton though, in 2017, I did write my first book, the chair yoga book for HarperCollins. And so that was really cool because I was writing that book while I was pregnant with twins. So I feel like I birthed 3, not just 2, the book and my boys. But Peloton, no joke, the amount, and especially when I first started working, because before we didn't even have this music platform, which we have now, where you can go in and it time codes for you and you can put all your playlists in. But before, we just had to use like a Spotify playlist, and then we had to do all of our own time codes. So we would match every single music or song up with our playlist. And we also had to write out every single class plan. So, I had gotten to this point where I could walk into Equinox and I wouldn't teach to music for the most part. I was teaching to breath. And I could read the room and I could pull out any class that was in my head from so many years of teaching. And then here comes Peloton, and I'm literally having to write out every single move by move, what I'm going to do where and when, so that the camera angles know. I had a real structure with warm up, flow, final poses, shavasana, so you'd have a structure that you'd have to put all of your classes into. And then on top of that, the playlist to match your classes. So we create all our own playlists. We create all our own classes within a given format. And when I first started, when we launched in December 2018, I think I was teaching 13 classes a week easily. It might have just been me, Anna, and Aditi. So I was going in, and so you'd get all your playlists in, all of your class plans in. Then you would show up at studio early to get hair and makeup done that we would do on our own. Then we would teach live. Then afterwards,
you do it on your own?
I do my own hair and makeup. Yep.
Okay.
Unless it was a real big special class.
Got it.
We always do our own hair and makeup.
Got it.
And then you'd meet with members afterwards because for all the classes, you had members in it, and you take pictures and you'd meet people and you get to hang out. And then maybe you'd have a meeting, the next day. How did class go? You'd have pre-production meetings. You'd meet with your producer. You meet with content. You'd figure out, they would also give you the schedule. Say, I have like a 20-minute hips and a 10-minute meditation. So it's a lot more work than people think.
And are you owning most? I'm assuming that you own most of the process. I can't imagine a world where you're getting much pushback on a lot, because it's your content, right?
Yes. And they might say, there might be times where you're like, oh, let's have you work on this a little bit more, or your introductions are falling flat, or, your producer and you could work together to help you also come up with new content ideas and fun ideas. Or if I had an idea, like I really want to do family yoga, kids yoga, how can we craft that? Or I kept begging for Pilates, like, let's do Pilates. But in a corporate environment, it's not like you can just turn around and start teaching Pilates.
Someone has to approve, and then
it would have to be, structured, and they'd have to figure out the rollout, and do we have enough instructors to we can't just start throwing classes on if they can't be consistent, right? There's a whole like protocol and there's a whole like production. There's so many moving pieces around it that you also have to be very, I'd say, patient and understand how the whole puzzle fits together. Especially when you're so used to just like, oh, I'm going to go do this class and teach it and I can't wait. It's like, wait, there's a whole like,
There's a system in
steps to
place.
get
Yeah.
there.
So that was around 2018, 2019.
From 2018 to 2024.
2018 to 2024. Okay. So
Yep.
one thing I do want to call out though was COVID. How did COVID impact you with regards to, I mean, I know how it impacted Peloton. Everyone knows how it impacted
Yeah.
Peloton, but talk to me a little bit specifically about, you and your experience throughout that.
I felt like it was just, I was so grateful to have Peloton and have a job. And my heart went out to so many because if I had just been doing what I had been doing prior to Peloton, I wouldn't have a place to show up and teach. I wouldn't be going to my privates at that point because everyone was just, hunkering in. So I felt like it was just saving grace because it gave me not only the stability and the pay, which was like amazing, but also this like community and place to move and vent together. So even if I wasn't showing up and performing or teaching a class, I was at home on the bike, doing one of my colleagues' classes, on the tread, running with my friends, high-fiving other members. Like it just felt like it was such an incredible support system for people in a time that was so devastating and dark. So I think that having Peloton was just a godsend. And then being able to get back on lives once we were able to do that was really awesome as well. Just to have a place then again, you could show up and be there for people. And I think that, for so many people, it was just so needed. I really lucked out to have been at that place in that time.
Yeah. Was Peloton the part of your career that increased your visibility the most? Or were you already pretty high up there in terms of visibility and then Peloton just kind of, you know,
That's a very good question, but I think Peloton for sure skyrocketed my visibility and my awareness, especially because up until Peloton, I wasn't as active on social. And that's another part of the job that people don't realize. When you are there, you also have this obligation of content for social media and keeping that going. So I think what's nice, I mean, Peloton is kind of like you're building each other's brands together, right? Like Peloton needs the instructors to keep building their brand, but also we need Peloton to keep building our brands. It's like a really nice mutual friendship and agreement.
yeah. And you called this out earlier. Again, from the outside, it looks like you guys are the creme de la creme of instructors in your respective fields, right? And I think about it all the time because when you think about being a high performer, you always want to be around people who are essentially excelling further than you are in their respective fields. And it feels like if you're in the boardroom with, all the other instructors, you're in the right room of people. Talk to me a little bit about what that was like, what that experience was like. Was it, I can't imagine it was 100% of the time positive, but was it like, mostly positive and what were the takeaways there?
I mean, my colleagues still,
Yeah.
inspire me every day when I see what they're doing. And just because I'm not there, it's like I still am in touch with so many of them. And I find that it was that energy similar to the energy of being in New York City. You come to New York City and people are hustling, and there are so many, like, when I talk about Broadway actors, for instance, you go to Broadway audition, and for every person that you see on stage, there's thousands, millions of them that are just as talented. You don't know how do they not get chosen for these roles? So it's a similar environment. You get into this atmosphere of like everyone just being so good at their crafts and so talented and so strong and so physically like fit that you're like, whoa, I need to up my game here. But, and I was talking to someone earlier about this, even with Peloton now, and now that I'm at Tonal, I love Peloton, and I want Peloton to continue to succeed because they are the number one force in connected fitness. So if they're not succeeding, other connected fitness platforms aren't succeeding either, nor are other at-home platforms, right? So it's like you want to we want to see all of us succeed and continue to succeed, because that's how we all continue to rise. So I think that, they're the leading platform in connected fitness. And so, and they're
Agree.
always innovating and doing so many cool things.
And it's a testimony. This is also a theme that has come several times on this show. There is one unique element to this industry that you work in is everybody wants everybody to succeed. And even when you think about, the boutique fitness studios that I was alluding to earlier, they all wanted each other to succeed. It didn't seem like they were all fighting for each other's business because they both saw that, if studio A succeeds, it's going to bring attention to so and so, which will then bring people into studio B. And so it's true. And I love that, in the context of your world, it's the same and it applies. So now let's kind of 24 to 25 and going to Tonal. As much as you're comfortable talking about why did you leave Peloton and
And
uh,
Peloton was like, I didn't, it was tough because I wouldn't have chosen to leave, but there was just a variety of circumstances. It was almost like the perfect storm at that time where, I'm a single mom with these 3 boys and I'm, trying to stay afloat in New York City, and they were restructuring some of the contracts where some instructors were teaching less. And it would have been like an ideal world if I had a different like relation or situation at home, I would say, right? Like 2 salad, whatever. But it just was like this perfect storm where I was like, I think maybe now is the time to leave, unfortunately. And it was so hard. And I was like, oh, I for months went back and forth on my decision, but then finally just made the decision. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go on my own. And so Tonal didn't come along until later because I had a year long non-compete. So I was just kind of, treading water, like doing brand deals because I
yeah,
could do
I
things
saw
like
you in Montauk.
Instagram
Yeah,
deals. Exactly. And I
yeah,
saw you in Montauk. Yep. And so I feel like then when Tonal finally reached out and was like, then I was like, oh yeah, my non-compete's ending in June, and they had this really, so first of all, I loved it, the timing, because I had already been upping my strength training as a 50-some-year-old woman going through perimenopause and noticing how like strength is really, really important for me. So I loved that idea. I was like, whoa, this is a cool evolution for me because I'm already starting to really lean more into the strength training. And then when they showed me that they were innovating with Pilates, I was like, okay,
I'm in.
no brainer. Like, this is awesome.
Yeah, I love that. No, that's awesome to kind of hear how that all played out. Um,
And so we shot our first content like end of August, I want to say.
okay.
And I'm not exactly sure when it goes live. I don't know if I can say exactly when it goes live, but I'm pretty sure like the content's going to be up soon
Okay.
on Tonal.
Well, I mean, I'm paying close attention because even the stuff that you're sharing on Instagram these days, there's a buzz. It's exciting to see you.
Oh, yay. Oh, I
It's
love to feel
exciting.
that.
Yeah, it's exciting to see you take these next steps.
Oh, thank
Um,
you.
I don't want to overlook this, but I want to make sure that I ask you the question properly. I don't want to go into any details around your divorce, but I do want to ask that period where you had to kind of figure things out on a personal level. And this really hits the crux of the show, right? Mile 40 is about moments where your back is up against a wall or that you're in a very difficult situation and channeling the mindset to figure out, how to move forward with grace and how to give yourself the best shot at succeeding, not necessarily, again, in the realm of professionally, but as a person, as a human, as a mother. And so, when you think about that era and that period where you were navigating the divorce and kind of with your children, talk to me a little bit some of the foundational values that you had to really kind of dig into in order to make sure that you're moving forward properly and setting yourself and your kids up for success.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I filed in June of 2021. And I don't think anyone ever gets married to get divorced. You're not ever expecting that to happen. And then there's certain circumstances where it has to, or it just does. I would say that definitely staying consistent and taking care of myself was huge. And I'm happy I had Peloton then as well, because part of my job was having to show up and move on camera. And so there were many days where I was like, I could just hide under a rock and I would love to just lay in bed and cry, but I can't because I have to show up for my job and I have to show up for my boys. And if I don't show up in the best, health that I can, then I'm not doing anyone a good, I'm doing everyone a disservice. So also I had this community where I could be pretty raw. There was times where I would be teaching on camera and I almost would start crying, but someone then would reach out to me and say, oh my gosh, thank you so much for sharing that, because I'm going through a similar thing, or I just had this happen, or I'm going through a divorce, or I just, so I felt like it was this really amazing community aspect where as much as I was showing up for other people, teaching them on the mat, they were showing up for me as well. And really like there for me and saying, it's going to be okay. So I think that you have to just really dig deep in those moments when things can get so messy and so horrible and everything feels so terrible and you feel like your world is falling apart. If you have those few things that keep you whole or make you feel really good, like your yoga practice or your meditation practice or your movement or your community, I had my friends, my family, my support system. I think that really, really made a world of difference.
I really appreciate that. And the reason I appreciate that is because when I think about what I want to do with this show, I want to bring people like yourself on who behind a screen, truthfully, things look perfect. But, when you come on this show and you call out, experiences like that, there's so much relatability there. And there's so much for a listener who potentially is going through something similar to walk away from and think to themselves, she's real. She's normal, and she's a real one. And she navigated it with grace and probably had to deal with a different kind of pressure, like you said, of showing up on camera with lights, on a regular basis as you're navigating something that, is difficult. And so I just want to say thank you for that. And I want to say thank you really for coming on, for the time today, for walking us through your trajectory and giving us some of that energy to absorb, that energy that I was talking about earlier. I think that is your true differentiator. I'm grateful for it. I felt it since meeting you. And I have no doubt you're going to leave our audience for the better. So I just want to say thanks, Kristin.
You are awesome. Thank you so much.
You got it.
Oh, I can't wait to see you again in person too. And please put your sister in touch with me. I'm so excited.
You got it. Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed this episode of the Mile 40 podcast, go ahead, subscribe, leave a review, and share the word. Thank you for being a part of the Mile 40 family. And let's unite in showing the world that comebacks are always greater than setbacks.